Okay, everyone, welcome. All of you are piling in at the moment. This is Dave from NPRN. We're going to start here in about 1 minute or so. So just please stand by for a second. We'll be right back. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started here. Some of you are just joining us. No problem, you haven't missed anything. We're just kicking off. So first of all, just wanted to say welcome to all of you. And I'm sure many of you, like us, are cloistered in our various homes and rooms, social distancing, and just want to extend a collective what the heck is happening moment here. Really insane what's going on, and we recognize that this is highly unusual times, and at NPRN we're doing our best to try to serve all of you as best we can during just a wild moment in global and in the world and world history here. It's incredible. So with all that said, all of our mission and our work needs to go on, and that's what today's all about. If you're not aware, my name is Dave Fortson. I'm the community manager for the Nonprofit Resource Network. As everything was imploding last week, we jumped into action with a number of other folks in the space, and in this case, the Center for Nonprofit Leadership at Cal Lutheran. So thank you, Dina and team, for your help here to pull together a couple of webinars along with the Santa Barbara Foundation and others to really figure out how we rise to the occasion and adapt to a new world, and a new world it is. As all of us for the foreseeable future are likely to be working remotely and have distributed teams, the need for us to be able to design our workspaces together to be productive and cohesive and be able to get our work done in a way that still keeps to our mission and honors the recommendations from the Center for Disease Control and others. Remote workplaces are going to be probably the near and maybe not too distant future for some time to come. So for those of you who are already working in Zoom and go to webinar or go to meeting, this isn't going to be entirely new for you. But for those of you who haven't, I think this will be a really good exercise in just getting a high level understanding of how we design workspaces for remote work. How do we use video conferencing? How do we use cloud-based tools to help everybody be able to communicate quickly and efficiently, just like you were sitting next to each other in the office? So we were lucky enough to track down Dr. Julie Lowndes. She's an old friend of mine and very talented in a number of fields. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more, but what she's going to walk you through, and again, just to set expectations, is more of a high level understanding of how to set up remote workspaces. We recognize that there are probably a variety of levels of understanding of how to engage remote workspace design, and we are happy to set up subsequent webinars as we better understand the needs of the community. So feel free to share your comments and just a few kind of housekeeping things. Again, this is brought to you by the Nonprofit Resource Network, which is funded by the Foundation Roundtable and also Center for Nonprofit Leadership at Cal Lutheran. We are going to be putting on a webinar tomorrow for development directors and executive directors. It's a town hall essentially at 11 a.m. And then on Monday, we have a neat one for those of you who are at home or you have kids at home and are about ready to pull your head or hair out. And, as we all kind of take the kind of physical and mental stress of what's going on, the Wilderness Youth Project team is going to guide us through some ways to design the home experience, utilizing the outdoors and nature, whether it's in your backyard or in parks or whatnot. So I highly encourage you to consider doing that. It's a little different take, but self-care is a big deal at this point, and we encourage you to join us Monday at 9:30 a.m. So we can, you can go to the latest NPR newsletter for more details about that. Okay, so with all that said, Julie, I just want to, again, thank you for joining us today. This is yours to take away. For those who are interested, the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little box that's Q&A. You can type in your questions there. We'll do our best to answer as many of those as possible, and anything that looks like it's not going to be answered, we'll do our best to answer it after the fact. So use the Q&A throughout the conversation, and we'll pull up questions as they arise. And if you have any technical or audio difficulties, also feel free to use the chat. So, all right, Julie, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and take it away. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. And hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. Despite the circumstances, like Dave said, I'm actually really happy to have the chance to share some of my experiences and expertise with you about designing a remote workplace. So I am a marine data scientist here at UC Santa Barbara. And for the last 7 years, I've been working collaboratively with teams in person and remotely around the world, and including designing and building my own program called OpenScapes, which I will be able to talk about as well. So I'm part of and have learned from so many online open source software communities, including Mozilla. And so in addition to making the Firefox browser, Mozilla is really dedicated to keeping the internet a place for good and to thinking about how we can connect and strengthen communities who work remotely. So this is going to be some of my thoughts on my experiences, and like Dave said, it's kind of like a starting point. It's an incomplete view of some of the practices that we were able to do remotely. So I want to start off with the purpose of our webinar today. So I'd like to share some good practices from these open communities that I've learned from. And really by what I mean from that is the technical setup and the social setup for remote meetings. So the outcomes of this webinar today, sort of the take-homes that I'd like you to leave with, are that remote meetings should encourage active engagement. And this can be done with a mix of software and social setup. So remote meetings are actually quite different, I think, from webinars like we're in right now, where I am the only one who has the floor and you are all sort of passively engaged. But we're able to use these same tools to really encourage active participation. And the software setup side of that is using video conferencing tools and collaborative documents. And the social side of it is to have really clear participation guidelines for your community, and also model the behavior yourself when you're a host and a participant. So the procedure that we're going to go through today in this webinar is that I'm going to first demo what I'm talking about using Zoom and using Google Docs as the software, and setting some participation guidelines and model behavior as well. Then we'll summarize some key takeaways, and then I'll share some thoughts on remote workplace design and how to create resilience within your teams. I also just want to say this POP, or this purpose outcomes procedure that I've outlined here, is a tool that Mozilla uses when they're designing meetings or events, or really a lot of different things remotely or in person. It sort of helps you crystallize what you'll be doing. And so I wanted to start off by sharing that as well. One other thing is that everything I'm showing, even though I'd like you to just watch for now, but everything is available for you online. And so you'll be able to have these slides and all the links within them. You'll be able to have the demo and use it for your own purposes. And you'll be able to access the recording once the webinar is finished. All right, so let's start with a demo. I'm going to share my screen in a different way. Let me just get it all set up here. All right. Let's see, so you're all seeing my screen here, and let's pretend for a moment that I wasn't in a webinar with you where I couldn't see all your faces, but let's say that you were here in in a webinar with me right now. So I've got my Google Doc on this side, and this is, again, a demo. So please just watch me, although I'm going to be demoing what I would, I'm demoing actually encouraging active participation. So it will be a little interesting to see how this goes. And again, all materials are available. All right, so you can see this document. I've got my date, my high-level information, and this, and some information up here. So let's walk through this. So if we look at some observations so far, I have my screen set up with my Google Doc open next to my Zoom window so that I can see folks and be able to type. And I was able to narrow that screen myself by dragging it with both softwares. And so having these two things like this really encourages active participation in a remote meeting. So we've got our hands on our keyboards as we're typing in this document. We've got our faces on, so we're able to see each other and connect with each other during our meeting. So if you were part of this remote meeting, you would be doing the same. There's really high level information easily available at the top of this document. So I have the date, the time, and the duration. I additionally have the meeting purpose with links to Zoom and the recording so that folks are able to find it more easily. And I also have this thing called roll call right here at the top of this document. And what this is this is a place where folks will sign in when they first join this meeting. And this roll call has several different purposes. So first of all, it's a record of the participants who joined the meeting, which is really important to have. And you can ask for information like emails and whatnot. And it also is part of this modeled behavior. So silent Google Docking is really important to model as a part of your meeting going forward, because it shows that everybody is not only invited to participate in this document, but that they're expected to as well. And also validates nonverbal contribution to a meeting. Webinars, remote meetings and workshops, there can be a lot of people can be on mute, and it can be hard to raise your voice. So having other channels to contribute to remote meetings is really important. There's also an icebreaker. So I asked who inspires you professionally and why. And this can be, you can ask any kinds of questions here, but it's a way to engage folks as they're joining the meeting. And having something like this roll call at the beginning of the meeting also gives a nice buffer for latecomers, because there will be technical issues as folks are joining meetings. Another set of observations are the behavior that I'm modeling here as host of this meeting. So first of all, I've prepared this agenda in advance, and I've shared it with all participants so that they're able to join as well. And this document is actually serving as my notes as I lead this workshop. And that lets me not only not have to remember everything and spend too much time preparing and trying to remember, but it also lets my attention be focused on my computer screen so that I'm able to see participants while I'm talking through some of these points. It's also really important because there's written and spoken redundancy and reinforcement. So folks learn in different ways, visually and through auditory. So it's a nice complement in order to keep folks engaged remotely. Also, as I'm going through the agenda, I'm using my cursor to draw attention just so folks are able to visibly see where I am. And if they get lost at any point, they can click up here. They'll be able to see my name, my little J. And if they click on me, it will immediately anchor them to wherever my cursor is in this document. And then finally, I'm trying to be calm and welcoming as I walk through this agenda. Okay, so that was kind of our observations as webinars participants, but let's pretend that I was actually leading this meeting. So this would be our actual agenda. So I'm gonna start off by saying, welcome, hi, everyone. I'm Julie Lowndes, and I'm leading our weekly team meeting here. So thank you for being here. Our goals today are, we're gonna have our first team meeting here online. And really the purpose is to establish and start getting comfortable with shared practices for remote meetings. And we'll also be able to reconnect and share our progress on a couple of work things as well. So part of welcoming you is to help onboard us to the way we're going to work here on our remote webinar. So just a quick introduction to the way we'll be using these collaborative notes. So this will be the document that we use every week for our weekly meetings and shared note taking. And you'll be able to find it linked through several different ways, but also through our weekly calendar invitations, which we have sent out to everyone. Just kidding, but you know what I mean. So when you join this document, please sign in your name with roll call and plan to participate throughout. And so there will be time for you to be able to contribute notes, silent Google Docking. Also, please use the comment feature in Google Docs, which you can, there's a shortcut here where you can always add a comment wherever your cursor is. You can also add emojis or GIFs or +1s, which kind of add support for somebody else's idea. So please participate in any way that you feel comfortable. A quick introduction to the way we're using Zoom in these meetings. We'll be using this particular room for all meetings, so you'll be able to find that same Zoom link in our weekly calendar invites, and it's also linked above. We'll be using the chat feature in Zoom. Let's use the chat feature really for technical difficulties or little side conversations, but anything that's really important in terms of our work, let's have that in the Google Docs because the chat window is temporary to this call. And since we're a small group, you're welcome to not mute as since we're all able to speak up, but if you have any background noise, please mute by default. Another thing is please call in on your own computers if possible. And that's because we'll be using the breakout room feature of Zoom, which allows us to have smaller conversations within smaller groups and then rejoin the full call. And that's that's better if you're on your own computer.
So Julie, just stopping there real quick.
Yeah.
So just on the breakout rooms, for those who are listening, if those of you have big groups, like if you have 8 or 10 people in a meeting, just to be clear, you can actually break out into groups of 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, and the administrator can call you back in from those breakout rooms. So just like if you were working on a big idea or a big concept, and you wanted essentially people to go into their own rooms at the office to go talk about it and then come back with their ideas. It's the same concept with breakout rooms. A really neat feature when used correctly.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dave. The next thing is please have your videos on if you're comfortable. It's nice to see our team's faces and to connect with each other remotely. And it's also another way to keep to be engaged actively. And again, we'll be recording these videos and link this to the agenda above so that if for some reason you need to leave early, you'll be able to catch up afterwards. All right. So next, we're going to set up our community participation guidelines. And this is really that we want to respect and value each other's opinions, ideas, styles, and viewpoints, and support each other. We want to be inclusive and help each other, help new perspectives be heard. And we also want to lead by an example and to match our actions with our words and to support each other in any way we can right now. So if you have any questions or issues about the way we're leading these meetings and ideas, please contact me as your team lead. So now I'm going to give a little sampling of what we might do in our meetings here. So we could do around the room updates, which are really nice. These are kind of, so if we go through our roll call and give quick updates, agile stand-up style, with the idea being that these are informative check-ins, pretty high level. They're not meant to go deep on any one topic, but it gives everybody a chance to speak and share about what they're up to in this period of time. So for example, I might say, I gave a talk at a conference last week and I connected with a lot of colleagues that I can give a deeper summary about in another time. And then maybe as Amel was talking, other folks would start typing in her notes as she spoke just to support as a way to stay engaged themselves and to do this shared note taking together. So you can lead that by example as folks are going around the room. Depending on your group size, silent Google Docking can be another effective way to give people time to share what they're doing, but not take the full, take as much time when you're in a remote setting. Okay, so let's say that the next agenda item was to go through a slide deck. So what I would do is have the slides linkable for anyone to click on themselves. So let's say
Julie, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you move, when you're talking about a particular item on that Google Doc, could you have it up in the center of the, yeah, that way it's at the bottom. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. So let's say that this agenda item was that Julie was going to debrief from a conference and wanted to share the slide deck that I've made in that conference. So what I've done is have the link to those slides here where anyone in this meeting can click on that. And then if I was going to walk through this slide deck, I would actually not share my screen, but talk about whatever slide I was on by number and let participants click through themselves. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But so let's say that that was a agenda item and we spent 15 minutes doing that. And now this is when our next agenda item could be planning our next upcoming event. And so in this case, we would use this breakout rooms feature that's really powerful. And so what I would be able to do was I could either pre-set up teams in advance through the Zoom breakout room feature, or I could also just click random breakout groups and have people break out in some kind of random fashion. But in whatever case I chose to do in the pre-setup, I'd like these breakout groups to share how things are going for them personally on this upcoming event that we're planning as a team, let's say. So I want everyone to be able to share what they're doing and what sort of support they might need. And during these breakout rooms, everyone's going to write their notes in this Google Doc so that across breakout groups, there's still a record of what was spoken about. And then after 10 minutes, I'm going to close all of those breakout rooms and bring everybody back together in the main room, and we'll be able to have a whole group share out. So like Dave said, this is when you're a host of a webinar and there's host of a meeting and there's multiple people there, you'll have a breakout room feature at the bottom of your screen and you're able to do this. Something I like to do at the end of a meeting is to share a couple little efficiency tips, at least write them down as little tools and tricks using the software that maybe you may or may not have time for, but it will be writing there. And then have a closing time where folks are able to add more resources or any other business that needs to happen. So let's pretend that was a meeting that we just had, and a few additional observations that I want to share are that we have slides shared beforehand. So that means that I don't have to screen share while I'm presenting, and participants are going to advance the slides on their own computer. This is a trick that Mozilla does, and I think it's really powerful because first of all, it reduces bandwidth, which screen sharing can take up quite a bit of bandwidth. But also it provides another way for participants to be engaged hands-on. If we were walking through a slide deck and I could sit back muted, it's pretty easy for passive engagement to lead to your mind wandering. And so having another way to be hands-on even during slide decks is really important. The breakout groups feature, I'm sorry I couldn't demo that right now. I don't have any screenshots, but it's a really effective way to have small groups chat about things during a meeting like you might at an in-person meeting. It also can promote team building and sharing and troubleshooting and sort of cross-pollination across people that might not talk with each other normally. And then having this ability to summarize between groups is really great too. Just a few other observations. I was indicating the times of each session and trying to stick to that time, and also indicating who leads, which in this case was all me. And something also that I do is to have a template of what I want my next meeting to look like. So this is something that looks pretty familiar to you now. And if I copy this all, I can do Command C. And then take this back up to the very top of the document and paste this in up here. And then let's say that this is now going to be our meeting for March 26th next week. So this is now going to be here as a template for people as we design our next meeting's agenda together. And something that's good is if you're in the same document and this is a record of all your meetings, to put the most recent date at the top, so you're not scrolling all the way to the bottom every time, but you sort of go back in time as you scroll down. And finally, this, if you use headers, which you're able to set in this menu here, then the headers will turn into a table of contents here in your Google Doc. And you're able to see this view by saying show document outline and toggle this on and off here. But this would then let you jump between different dates if you needed to find something, and the search feature, of course, is very powerful within these documents. Okay, so that was just a quick demo, and I'm sure you have a lot more questions on that, but let me just share a few more key takeaways and thoughts, and then we'll do a Q&A afterwards. Okay, so a few key takeaways there. So I'm really promoting remote collaboration through active engagement. And I'm doing that by having this mix of technology and social setup. So the video conferencing software where each person is on their own laptop with videos on and in breakout rooms. This collaborative document where agendas and live note taking, so we're reinforcing nonverbal channels of participate, and we're having records of the meetings that occurred. And then participation guidelines and model behavior really can help set the tone of the meeting. And depending on the meeting and the community, it can also really help break down any kind of hierarchy and lift up people and let everyone feel welcome. So in terms of video conferencing software, we're using Zoom right now. I use Zoom in my work, but there's so many other options that you can choose from. And really, I think critical features to look for when you're deciding what works best for you is that you want you want people to be able to call in from their computer, like I'm doing right now, or from their phone. And that's really important so that people are able to participate even if they're not physically at their computer in any given moment. You want there to be video possibilities and screen sharing possibilities. Breakout rooms is really great if you're, and I know Zoom does that, and I think others do as well. And then also remember that you have this chat window, but that it is a temporary, it's not a permanent record of anything. In terms of collaborative note software, Google Docs is a really popular choice, but there are others. Just a few are called Etherpad and HackMD. Again, the important features here are that you have this online access and that you're able to control permissions of who's able to edit and view. And even the same document, you can have different groups of people with editing or viewing or commenting privileges. So it's a nice way to sort of share your work more broadly. It's also nice to have version history or contributor history, and these softwares are getting really powerful with this as well. Community participation guidelines or codes of conduct. There's some examples from some of the online open source communities that I'm part of. But really what this is trying to do is have clear, explicit statements about what behavior is appropriate in your community and have this be seen and heard so that participants are aware. And so it's mentioned out loud. And really the idea is to set the tone and put this in place before you know of any problems. Like by default, it's better to be deliberate about the way you want your community and your remote meetings to be rather than expecting it by default. And so depending on what's going on, you might need to have avenues for action. Like for me, I have people talk to me and hope that they're comfortable to do so. Okay, so a couple thoughts on remote workplace design and resilience for your teams. So software choice is a big question, and the answer is that there's no single best software choice, and that also the software scape is constantly evolving and improving with new features and new quantities of participants and everything. So my advice here is to really, it's the best software choice is what your community uses and is comfortable with. So talk to your community about what your needs are and choose a software that's a good fit for you now. But also be flexible to change. So you might decide to switch softwares later, and And really, it's about being flexible and interoperable between software. So even though I use Zoom as my default video conferencing software, if someone sends me a WebEx link, I'm able to still click on that link, use that software, either downloaded or from the browser. And I kind of expect that the features in Zoom will be possible in that other software. So I would expect that there's a chat window and that I'm able to screen share. And so you can kind of get confident and translate between softwares and be able to evolve with them. But really, I think that as much as the choice in software, it's the social setup around that software, and really to take the time to onboard folks so that they are comfortable using new software and to really create this welcoming tone when you're using it together. And also, I think being transparent and empathetic is really important. You know, we're all figuring this out together. I learn something new every time I lead a remote meeting or workshop, and I do not have all the answers by any means. So I think that being upfront about that is really important. Let's talk about a couple of good personal habits for remote meetings. I think it's really important to start on time and end on time, especially now as folks have different things going on, and it's just nice to be respectful of each other's time. Being in a quiet place with limited background noise is really important. I have a microphone today. I don't often do that on smaller calls, but I try to find a quiet place. Muting your microphone along with the quiet place. Abby from Mozilla talks about doing this liberally and quickly. So by default, maybe have your microphone on mute if you're aware of background noise. Turning off computer notifications, especially important when you're screen sharing, so that calendar things or texts don't show up on your computer. You might want to do that on your phone as well, depending. And also having non-distracting backgrounds. Like, know that digitally, if you have a messy desktop in the background, I often do because I take a lot of screenshots, know that might be distracting. And similarly, there might be distracting things behind you in real life, depending on what's behind you as you are on video. Also think about privacy and security a little bit when you're sharing things online. Make sure that you don't have anything up on your computer when you're screen sharing that might be personal information that you don't want to share, or similarly anything written on a whiteboard behind you or something if that's something that's private. So you won't be able to do all these things every time, and that's absolutely fine. And I think having empathy for others when they have challenges is really important too, because we're all trying to do our best, and things don't work out the way we've planned all the time, and that's okay. I think many of you have seen this BBC interview, and this has happened to all of us, and that's okay. Okay, so when you're working with a team remotely, it's important to have both technical and social communication channels with your team. So I think that this can be done by having standing scheduled meetings where you do check in, kind of like that demo that I just showed. Of course, how many you do is up to you. I think also then having other channels to reach each other asynchronously throughout the day. And this can be a variety of ways. You know, email works great for a lot of people, phone or messaging software. There's different pros and cons of all of these ways, and they can be used in combination, but having ways that you're checking in on each other is really important. And I also think prioritizing the social setup and making this remote work time supportive and less lonely is really key. So you're able to use the same setup to have virtual coffees or happy hours. You can share like cooking recipes or whatever in the same sort of format, but to sort of reinforce these values and connect with each other. I just saw this from a friend on Twitter who's saying that a really nice practice is to have people post daily statuses or their daily status, where they talk about what they did yesterday, the goals for today, any blockers they have, and how they're feeling. And I thought that it was really nice that he said that if you're in management, lead by being honest and vulnerable about that last question, especially now. Okay, so I'll just end by giving a quick run through about my personal workflow, if that sort of tangible example can help. So I use Google Drive for most of this type of stuff that I do, and I have a mindset towards future me and future us. So what I'm thinking about when I say that is that I take this same approach of Google Docs and recording links and summaries of what I've done. I do that if I'm having a meeting of one, like my personal diary document, or if I have a meeting of over 40 people. So I'm always trying to leave digital breadcrumbs for myself, but also for other people to pick up where I left off. So I always am using not only the software that's collaborative, but having the mindset that this work I'm doing might be collaborative at another time. So I also stay connected with different teams and communities through a host of ways. So I use email, Twitter, and Slack, and I don't use Slack very well, and I don't use Twitter very well either. But I'm on these three platforms, and I also block off time where I turn off my Wi-Fi and work interrupted offline. And I also try to take breaks. I try to work regular hours when I work from home. And I try to minimize laptop couch time because it's really bad ergonomics. And I try to get up and stretch and go outside. This OpenScapes program that I run is a remote mentorship program for teams. And it's all run with Google Docs, Zoom, and a code of conduct. Additionally, I've written an online book that I also wrote in open source software in R, the programming language, and I published that online. So that's an additional resource for this program. And the reason I'm sort of talking about this is because I think even though the curriculum and this program itself can be useful for you as a model, the curriculum is focused on the habits and mindsets around working openly and collaboratively. It's in a data science context, but I think it still might be useful. But also, almost maybe even more important than the content, it's the program architecture that I think is really powerful. It's modeled after one of Mozilla's programs called Open Leaders that they've run over 7 or 8 sessions. And it's really all about engaging and empowering leaders who are leading open communities or remote communities. Oops. So this is just an example of some of the OpenScapes participants sort of paying this forward with their own teams and having this dual Zoom Google Docs set up in their own research groups. So here's a few other existing accompanying resources. Abby, who mentored me in all of this open remote work, is really active on Twitter and has also written a recent blog about this. But I'd really, one of the most valuable things for me working remotely is to engage in broader online communities. And for me, that meant really redefining who I considered a collaborator and who I considered a community. So I know you are all so lucky to have the nonprofit resource network community. And I mean, this can be a chance to strengthen your ties remotely and also to connect to other folks throughout the world who are doing similar work with you as well. So it'll be really interesting to talk about the channels you have for that. So I'll stop there and we'll take time for questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julie, so much. Really appreciate it. Excellent information. A couple things I'm just going to add, and then we'll open up to questions. Just a few other tips that I found in doing remote work and international collaborative teams. Timers work really well, and having a timekeeper and a little ding that goes off at the end of a time that's allotted if you're uncomfortable with interrupting people, just as a check mark that people know that it's, they're allotted 2 to 4 minutes or whatever is expired. I also want to point out, and again, we're obviously focused on Zoom and Google, and frankly, there are a number of options. So this is our domain expertise, but for those who are using Google Invite Calendar, there's an amazing Chrome plugin, a Zoom Chrome plugin that you can install that allows you to set meetings just like you normally do in Google and invite people into that meeting, and it makes it a Zoom meeting, automatically assigns it a Zoom address. Everyone has that Zoom address on their in the invitation, and frankly, we use it probably in half of our invitations on a daily basis with our folks around the country. Again, just another kind of easy peasy way of integrating multiple technologies together so that they seamlessly work together. And I, also again during this time, I wanted to like reemphasize, consider a tea and consider a happy hour with your teams right now. It's, even as a way of onboarding people into Zoom and make it a fun, playful moment, or into your remote working. We did it actually last 2 nights ago with my family around the country. And we all sat and had a glass of wine and just talked, and, had all the screens up on, and it was just a neat way in a kind of a chaotic moment for us all to connect visually and have a conversation. And while it's not the same, it was just one of those things where the technology worked for the time that we're in at the moment. And I know a lot of your teammates would appreciate hearing from you or seeing you a little more closely in a kind of an intense time. So we have a number of questions, and I want to be mindful of how we answer these and be respectful of everyone's time. So we'll just try to knock some of these out. First of all, a couple of them had to do with what's being shared. Julie, just to confirm, everything that we've seen today will share, and we can provide to all the attendees and even people who registered. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. So everyone, all the links, all of the recording, as well as the Google Doc and the slide deck will all be available to all of you and your teams. Thank you in the true spirit of open source. And just remember that open source community is truly open source. That will be available. So please stand by. Someone asked, is Zoom available for free and HIPAA compliant? I don't know about HIPAA compliant. There is a free version of Zoom that you can access. Do you know anything else, Julie, just on that end?
I think a lot of these softwares have free versions with, fewer features. Yeah, but I know as much as you do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then breakout rooms. We had a number of questions on breakout rooms, mostly around, do you have to set up breakout rooms in advance of a meeting? And can you, just as in a detailed way, set up the breakout rooms on the fly during a meeting?
So yes, so you can go to Zoom's web page and they have a really good outline of this, but yes, you can set up rooms in advance if you know the participants and their email addresses that they'll use. So you can do that in advance. On the fly, the quickest way is to do it randomly. You can also pick people who are already online on the call and pick them and put them into rooms. And at any time, you can also drag people from one room to another. So if you were trying to randomize and it turned out that 3 people who work really closely are in the same room, you can pull one out, for example. The thing that is not possible right now is for participants to choose to break out in their own self-organized groups. I would expect that is coming, but right now it's all host controlled.
Great, thank you so much. Someone asked, is there a preference for Zoom versus Google Hangouts? And do you know if there are limits on how many people can participate in each?
I'm sure there are limits on each and that they differ. I don't know those comparisons myself. I do not believe you can do breakout rooms in Google Hangouts at the moment.
Thank you. Question, is Chrome free? Yes, I believe Chrome is free for everybody. It says, thank you for this webinar. We are not currently set up with software as we are a direct service agency. Is Chrome free? So again, Zoom is free, Chrome is free. Again, and as some people have pointed out, Zoom's free version only allows for 40-minute limit and for 3 or more people, and unlimited time for 2 people on Zoom, for whatever that's worth.
Mm-hmm. I know. So yeah, so Google Chrome is an internet browser and that is free. And then Google Drive is something that comes associated with a Gmail address. And that is also free. It has limited storage up to some limit. But you're also able to do team, admin, enterprise Google products with much more storage.
Question came in, do you have any recommendations or best practices for using Zoom or another app for panel interview of a candidate or for a job?
Hmm. So we've done interviews over Zoom before. Depending on how, I mean, Dave, you might be able to speak to this too. I mean, I'm set up as a panelist, which means that I am not a host, but have, the ability to share my screen, but not do some other things that Dave is able to do, let's say.
Yeah.
But I think, I think you do the same setup where you had a link for the interviewees and a link for the folks on the panel, and you would kind of set the tone as you led. I don't know, Dave.
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't used Zoom that way. I think, frankly, the best thing to do would be to set up a demo and just do a practice, just to kind of imagine for both the panelists and the interviewee how you might design that experience by doing a practice run, basically. So it's a good question. Does Zoom have a polling feature? And the answer is yes. I know they do for webinars, and I think they do for meetings as well. Not something that I've used very much. I don't know, Julie, have you used it often?
I really haven't. I've seen it being used, but I have never set one up myself.
So somebody asked, is there a way to see a list of all the participants? And the answer is yes. Particularly as administrators, we can see in a webinar format all of you who are on the call, and we can actually turn you live to speak and chat to you directly, all kinds of different things. In a meetings scenario, that's a difference. One of the big differences between a meeting and a webinar is the meetings, everyone essentially has similar power over, not necessarily, there's a host and hosts that have ultimate power, but you get to see and talk almost equally. And in a webinar, it's one to many. And the administrator by default has, extreme power over the participants or the attendees and their ability to communicate directly to you or not via video, audio, or chat. Question, I'm trying to set up a confidential Zoom space to meet with teens who need support. Is this possible?
I don't know. I mean, you're able to have a Zoom meeting that, like, the only people that know about it are the people you've emailed. I mean, I think that's how I would interpret that. But that's the default. You don't have to share your meeting spaces with anybody that you don't want to.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, again, what's confidential and what's not. Obviously, everyone's aware you can choose to record, and actually just a best practice, particularly when I'm meeting with individuals where I feel like I'm interviewing, I ask permission for the ability for everyone on the call for me to record, even though, and I think I made that clear at the beginning of this one. I hope I did. If I didn't, I'm sorry. But generally ask for permission about recording before you hit record as a confidentiality measure. It should be clear to the administrators, and I think it's actually clear to the fellow meeting participants, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, participants can see when you're recording. And when I was, for me, when I ask people to turn their videos on, I also say I'm recording, and if they're not comfortable with their faces or whatever, their voices, that they can let me know, and I won't record.
Great. And Steve, our friend out in the community, wanted us let you know that Outlook calendars also have the Zoom meeting plugin option also.
Awesome.
Just like Google Calendar. Somebody asked, do you have any tips or resources about how to prepare team members that are less tech savvy to get comfortable using these softwares? Love the happy hour idea. We have a board meeting that we're looking to do online, and I anticipate that many of our directors may have trouble.
Yeah, there's a lot of great resources online, and some of these are just a couple that I linked in our document here. A woman has created her own Zoom Basics that kind of gets people in her experience up and running. There's also some other more specific community things, but I think I think the idea of a happy hour and walking through someone else's tutorial or someone else's Facebook post or Twitter feed or whatever of how they've done it. That's one of the best things that we do when we are in some of the coding communities that I run, is that we use existing tutorials that other community members have made, but we use it in our team context, whether it's happy hour or another meetup. So I think if you, if you start from some of the names or links that I've got here in this document, I think you'll find other good resources for you. We can follow up.
Great, thank you. So we have 10 more minutes, keep the questions coming. So in sharing slides, are you using Google Docs for this as well, or another platform?
So yes, I am using, you can all still see my whole screen, right?
Correct.
Great. So I'm using Google Slides for all of my slides. It works the same way that Google Docs in terms of sharing and permission and collaborative co-creation of this slide deck as I would a document. Yeah, and I'd say the features are like anything that I would have wanted to do in PowerPoint, Google Slides can do as well. So I basically don't use PowerPoint anymore. And it's a really nice way to just share your work more broadly with your community members.
Yeah, and I'd say similarly, we've worked in PowerPoint slides as well as what's the one from Keynote. Yeah, and we've definitely basically defaulted to slides at this point. Google Slides, it's just easier and very transferable in the Google ecosystem, for better or for worse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, in terms of ease of sharing, collaboration, co-creation, and file size, Google Slides is the way to go. Mm-hmm.
A question, good question here. Not all of our teens, and I assume this goes for just people in general, non-technical folks or people who have access issues, have access to computers. Mm-hmm. Any recommendations for interactive phone participation?
Mm-hmm. I'm like 90% sure that phone participants are also able to do breakout rooms. And I think that, you can design your meetings to be like less visually required, I guess, if you have a lot of participants without computers. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, there's a lot of times where people are participating in between, by traveling to somewhere or without access at home.
Yeah, and I'll just speak to that a little bit. And this goes for just general phone usage. Every Zoom invitation that is generated includes the ability to call in from a phone anywhere and be a participant. Again, I'm using a smartphone still, so I can literally participate just like I do on my computer for the most part, with video and seeing on my Zoom app the slides and whatever else is going on, and mute and the whole 9 yards. Or if again, you're just like out in the sticks or you don't have Wi-Fi or access to a computer, you can call into a Zoom meeting and you treat it essentially like a conference call. Where the administrator still has a fair amount of power to mute you and call on you and things like that. And you have the ability to communicate and hear everything from an audio perspective, for whatever that's worth. This is a good question. Have you you've interviewed and hired via Zoom, but have you ever had to discipline or fire? And tools for that.
I cannot speak to that. I don't know what my recommendations would be.
Yeah, similarly, being in a firing position, we've actually not had to fire via Zoom yet. I'm sure there's there's probably some really good memes around that floating around, I'm sure. But yes, it's a good question. I think, I don't know, some new uncharted territory, and maybe it's something you can share back with us.
Yeah.
Is it possible to make a Zoom meeting in the future using Microsoft Office Home on the web browser without having Outlook on the computer? I think the short answer is yes. If you create a Zoom, go to zoom.us and create an account, you can do everything from there without having a plugin or an app. You can just use your browser if that's the question. In Zoom or Google Hangouts, can one have more than one at the same time in two separate virtual rooms? I'm not sure if I understand. Does that make sense?
Like you being in two separate meetings at once.
Sounds like.
I don't think you can do that within the same software. I suppose you could try having Hangouts open with one group of people and Zoom open with another group of people, but I don't know how your microphone would, I think everyone would hear you say anything. I'm not sure I'd recommend that approach, but there might be a context where someone's, I think for some things like that, like if it's something you really need, yeah, Google will be the friend and expecting that someone else has needed to do that and design something for it if it's a feature that a lot of people want.
Yep. Susan, one of our school board members in the community, wanted to let you all know that the school district is working with elected officials and Cox to increase computers and internet access in our community given the new reality. And I know that's been an ongoing drive. I think it's become more acute. Mm-hmm. So just know that. Thank you, Susan, for sharing that information for those. You know, my child's the Adelante, you know, which is, you know, got a number of students who have accessibility issues or financial challenges, and they provided computers to everybody actually to do remote learning for this past week. And it's been amazing to see all the children up on the screen talking to each other. So it is possible, and I expect we'll see more of that over the next week or two as people and the districts react and redesign for remote learning. Mm-hmm. There was a question around, can you have two hosts at the same time? And the short answer is yes. You can have co-hosts. Oftentimes when you're gonna leave a meeting, I'll say, and this is something we didn't talk about, and Julie, you can speak to this. If you have to leave a meeting early and you started the meeting, you want to assign somebody else in your meeting as a host or the co-host, so that so that you can walk away from the meeting and not end it. Is that accurate, Julie?
Yeah, and I actually think that that's a really good practice if you're having, you know, more than 5 people on a call together, to give someone else co-host privileges in case your internet cuts out. Like, you know, you don't want to be cutting the entire meeting off if you're intermittent for a period of time or something. So that's good practice.
Yep. Question around, for public meetings, some discussions are held in closed session and then the meeting reopens into public session. Suggestions on how to do this? Good question.
That's a very good question. I don't know of a feature in Zoom that would sort of set that up for you. I think it would be,
it's almost like a breakout room, maybe. A breakout room for the board to go and talk. But again, you know, there's, if they're truly closed and confidential, you know, there may be issues around encryption and quote unquote privacy that don't have to worry about in the analog world that digitally may not be technically set up if somebody was really wanting to hack you. So
right. I wonder if that would be an example of when like the board would leave that meeting and go to a different software to talk themselves. I don't know. Yeah, that's a really good question.
Great question. Yeah. Let's see, we have lots going on here. Internet, okay, so you see some questions is Brown Act. I'm sorry, people looks like they're communicating to each other. Thank you, Q&A team. Does Zoom have nonprofit rates? International, somebody brought up earlier, and I apologize, I skipped over this, Michael. It was a good point, international calls or just generally language. Just be mindful of folks where English is a second language, talk clearly to ensure comprehension. That was just the best practice. Someone said, I'm doing my first remote on Monday. I should start with my agenda. This is a brainstorming session. So I should set up access to both Zoom and Google Doc to record comments, or does Zoom record the comments? Question mark.
I believe Zoom does not record the comments in a meeting. That might be different in a webinar. But in a meeting, that chat window is a temporary thing that once you hang up will disappear. So that's why I think the getting in the habit of your Google Doc being the record of comments and Q&A and chat is really important.
Great. So I think we got most of the big questions. I know, my apologies, there are a few that are still hanging there. But it is 11:30. I want to be mindful of everyone's time and respectful of all of you who've attended. There's 87 of you still on this webinar. So thank you so much, Dr. Julie Lowndes, otherwise known as my friend Julie. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you and your time. Special thanks to Center for Nonprofit Leadership and at Cal Lutheran, and Dina, thank you so much. And the Foundation Roundtable for your support of NPRN. Again, reminder, tomorrow at we are on at 11 a.m. virtual roundtable for development directors and executive directors to, have a little bit of event session, look at some economic whiplash that's coming at us, and map out some things on how we might move forward. Just a reminder, this is being recorded. We'll get it up on NPRN tomorrow under the resources section, along with all of our other webinars, if you're in case you want to listen. And I do encourage you, if there are other webinars that you are interested in presenting to the nonprofit sector as a whole, or you would like us to put together, please email info@nprnsb.org, and we will do our best to get these together, particularly as they are urgent related to the COVID event that is facing our community. So thanks everyone again. Really appreciate all of your time and energy. Julie, thank you for your time. And that is the end of today's webinar. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.